All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited that we're getting a chance to kick off our communications series. Today, I'm Wendy Winter-Searcy with the Career Center, and we're just delighted to be part of the VIP Professional Development Program. And thanks to Fran Viejo and Scott Irvine, we're able to provide this outstanding information for you today. And I'm really excited to introduce our speaker. Colleen Badinsky is here today to talk about public speaking, and this is going to be a crash course, a chance for you to get a whole bunch of information to be prepared for your first presentation going into your internship or your first job, and you'll be very well prepared in a short amount of time. So Colleen is an assistant director in our Foundation of Constituent Relations. She has a great background in instructing in communications and public speaking. So we're delighted to have her here and to share her insights and wisdom. So thank you, Colleen.
Thank you, Wendy, for letting me be here today. As Wendy mentioned, my name is Colleen Badinsky. I'm the Assistant Director of Constituent Relations at the Foundation. A large focus of my job is campus engagement. And so before I was on at the Foundation, I think what might be most interesting for you is that I have been teaching public speaking in different communication courses for about the past 12 years at various institutions of higher ed. And actually, I see Perla on here. I was a teacher for her at Red Rocks Community College. So Perla, happy to see your name. And during that time, I also worked a lot with stakeholders and a variety of audiences to try to make technical information digestible for a variety of audiences. So when I was asked to talk today, I was thinking about what would be the most meaningful things for you to walk away with. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to dive right in and kind of explain to you what I have planned. Can everyone, Wendy, can we see my presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So today I'm going to divide up my talk into two different sections. First, I'm going to spend about 10 minutes talking about some of these fundamentals of public speaking. Let's say it's kind of a crash course, okay? So what are some things that we can walk away with that can really help your presentation be more effective? And one of the primary components of that is storytelling. So no matter how technical of a presentation that you have, you're still telling a story. So I'm going to kind of walk you through that and show you what that means. What does that mean for the audience? But more importantly, what does that mean for you? And then the last part, I want to spend about 10 minutes talking about visual aids, because visual aids, I think, are really important when you are translating information for technical audiences. So you'll see me use this term technical presentations. That just means data-driven. I think that's what a lot of you can relate to, especially being at Minds. A lot of the talks that you might give will be possibly about research or some of the exciting and fun things that you're learning. Or if you're in the job market, presenting for a larger constituent base. So I'm going to spend some time talking about that. And then today we're going to wrap up with a group activity. Yes, I'm going to make you talk to each other. I'm going to make you think about some of the things that I'm presenting today. So as I go through this, try to write down some things that are interesting, some things that you might even find trivial, or some things that you might be thinking about in a different way. And so we'll have a little activity at the end to apply some of those concepts. So I'm going to dive right in because I'm going to try to do a semester's worth of lecture in 30 minutes. So stick with me. The first thing that I think is important to talk about when we're thinking of fundamentals is how do you prepare for a speech? And this is the old adage, proper preparation prevents poor performance. And I cannot emphasize this enough. You have really great ideas to give. You have a lot of work that goes into presenting. And the more prepared you are, the more effective you are. Because ultimately, you're telling a story. Even in technical talks, you're still telling a story. You're telling us your perspective, your point of view. And so for that, you really need to create a storyboard. And I don't mean this in the literal sense of, some protagonist and antagonist in some literary format, but I mean an outline. You need to create what are the most important objectives that you want to get across to your audience, and how can you do that, and how can you be effective? Because if you walk away with anything today, I really want you to walk away with this. You are talking to an audience. Your entire speech, your entire presentation should be audience-centered. And this even goes to the very technical things of giving a dissertation defense or a thesis defense or talking about a project in a class. Sometimes you know who that audience is, but other times you don't know those variables and you have to make assumptions. But if your message is not audience-centered, then it's going to be lost. And that's a shame because you put in a lot of work to be there. And your audience is also putting a lot of work into listening to you. So being audience-centered is really important. I could spend 6 weeks talking about each of one of these components, but I'm going to give you kind of a rundown on what you can think, how you can be audience-centered. And the first thing is to think about, what is it that you want to tell them? What is it that you're really trying to capture here? And then how are you going to tell them that? And then in the end, how do you tell them what you just told them? Public speaking is all about reiteration. It's all about putting those nuggets out there, having them walk away with something, and then really being able to reflect on it. We all think that we are great listeners, and I'm not saying that you are not, but if you listen to a presentation, 24 hours from now, you are only going to really capture about 10% of what you heard. And so you need to really outline those nuggets. And it starts with developing a central idea. There's only 3 types of presenting: informative presenting, persuasive presenting, and a performance, as in accepting an award. I think the one that you're most familiar with is going to be informative. And so that's what I'm really going to focus on today. And what your audience should be feeling with that after your speech is what you want to try to accomplish. You want them to walk away with something more than when they came into the room. So to kind of wrap up my crash course here in public speaking, the first part of this is in the introduction. You want to tell us what you're going to tell us. You want to outline those features in your introduction. Your introduction should only take up 10% of your entire speech. If your speech is 5 minutes long, your introduction should be around a minute, no more, and you can even make it less. It's really that opportunity to give them a reason to listen to you. Today, I am going to talk to you about this. And then also, why? Why are you the one that you should be up there on stage? Why are you the one that should be directing all of your attention? And to be credible, you can do that in a variety of ways. You can do that through data. You can do that through storytelling. You can do that through creating a narrative. But that's what should really be accomplished in the introduction within that first minute of a 5-minute talk. And then most importantly, be interesting. You can do little tricks in the trade to be interesting, but as you build that credibility, you're creating interest. The big portion of your talk is going to be the body. And again, this might be super trivial for everyone, but these are major things to think about because you want to tell us your story. What is it that you're really trying to outline for us? Through that, you should be clear and concise. And I'm going to talk to you more in visual aids, how you can be clear and concise, even if your talk is heavy in data. Because you can use visual aids. Visual aids can be a variety of things. It can be PowerPoint, it can be Google Slides, it can be something tangible that you, if we could be in person, that you pass around the room. There are a lot of ways to be interesting in the body of your speech. Another important component is to use transitions. Take the listener on that journey with you. Tell them what you just told them and then tell them what you're going to tell them. For example, I just went over how to construct an introduction, and now I'm about to tell you to also be interesting in your body of your speech. There are little components that you can do to help tweak that. And so that's why I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about visual aids and how you can bring that clear and concise component to a talk, no matter what kind of talk that you're giving. And then finally, we have the conclusion. The conclusion is this wonderful area to bring closure. We all love closure, right? And also the thing about a conclusion is people love to know when it's coming. And so it's always great to transition into the conclusion. And it should only take about 5% of your talking time. Again, if you're giving a 5-minute speech, this should be no more than 30 seconds. You're not introducing any new ideas here. You're bringing closure to all the important things that you just talked about. So you tell us what you just told us. So for example, today, if this was the conclusion, which it's not, so don't get too excited, but today I would say, I opened this up with some, very basic fundamentals of thinking about your audience. We went into the introduction, and then we went into some of those nuggets of what should be in the body of your speech. That's my conclusion. We're done. That's all the audience wants. They want to be able to turn off their brain a bit. So you need to end strong. You can end strong in a variety of ways. Again, data is awesome. You can end strong on some sort of statistic. You can end strong on some great summary, but leave them with something wondering more. And I can talk to you more about this when we talk about technical presentations, because if it's data driven, the ending, your conclusion can all be about the discussion that you've just unfolded. And you want to provide that closure. And most importantly, be interesting. Interesting doesn't mean that you have to be funny or quipped or get out of your comfort zone. Work on the material that you're presenting. Work on that message. If it's interesting for you, it's going to be interesting for the audience. They can feel that passion. And so you want to lead them with that. So here's a little recap of sort of this first part of what I'm going to talk, this first part of these fundamentals. So you want to create your story. You want to take the time to really sit down and create that outline, introduction, body, conclusion. What does that look like, and how do all of these pieces fit in? And then most importantly, you want to consider your audience. How do you want to tailor that message to fit the audience that you're presenting to? I know today I'm giving a lecture at the Colorado School of Mines, so I can tell my audience is going to be really STEM focused. The students are going to be very driven. And so those are things that you can consider while you're thinking about this sort of blanket of people that you are giving this really important talk to. If your message isn't tailored to them, then your message is lost. I could give this same presentation to a group of high schoolers, and we would be talking about different things based on the type of experiences that they have and how many talks that they've probably given in their lifetime. And so you need to think about how you're going to tailor that message for your audience so that it's not lost. And then this is my world of C's. My name is Colleen, so I gravitate towards C's. And you got to think about credibility, how to be clear, how to be concise, and how to bring closure. That really is what public speaking is about. It's about navigating your story through all of those components. So I think a really effective way that I can help demonstrate this is talking about technical presentations in visual aids, because we take all of these components and I can spend a little bit more time on that. So that recaps sort of like my fundamental crash course in public speaking. Now I'm going to spend the rest of the time before our activity talking about visual aids in technical presentations. Our brain processes visual aids way faster than we can read text. I think we learn that more and more in this age of COVID, since we've gone online, and a lot of our learning has been through seeing, through this screen in front of us. 90% of information is transmitted in the brain visually. 50% of your brain is always active in processing that information. We use 70% of our sensory receptors, and then 40% of people, even with learning challenges, they respond better to visual aids. Take a moment and think about what you're doing right now. Your brain, whether how interested you are or how much you have checked out, your brain is still working. It's working on something, and you're trying to gravitate towards something that I'm saying. Or I hope so, but we'll see. So why do we use visual aids? Well, we use them to illustrate our verbal content. Again, I know that sounds super elementary and you're like, I've come to this today learning something that I've already know, but let's really dissect that. Let's really see what that means. How are we illustrating what it is that we're talking about? Because we're here for a purpose. Visual aids summarize materials in a very clean way. Visual aids provide examples in a snapshot. Visual aids can create impact. We know that a picture says 1,000 words. It also supports an audience's understanding. It allows the audience to take time to really digest the information that you're presenting in front of them. And then most importantly, it really builds your credibility. If you take the time to make your visuals look professional and match what you are saying, your credibility is out the roof. People want to listen to you. They know that you did the research. They know that you spent the time to really put things together, and that whether it's subliminally or not, people appreciate that because you're asking for their time to listen. So I just want to kind of reiterate, we live in a visual world. Audiences need to understand what we're saying. Otherwise, if the message is lost, it's been a waste of time on both sides. And we have a lot of complex ideas, and visual aids can help streamline those complex ideas. And then also it creates enthusiasm. This is the part that can make you interesting. Again, you all have interesting things to say. So this is the part that can help, support that. So as you've got your outline, as you know what you're going to present for your talk, when you're developing your aids, and that's what they are, they're an aid, they're not a crutch, you should always be asking yourself these 8 things. And if you walk away with anything today, think about these 8 things that you can reflect on. 4 of them are right here. When you're making a slide, I'm just using PowerPoint as an example because that's what I'm using today. I know there's a lot of other forms of visuals. You want to say, why am I showing this? Why is it important? Does it match what I'm saying? Is it clear or is it messy? We're aesthetic learners. And is this audience appropriate? Because remember, you've made those assumptions about who is out there. If you're using a picture, is it concise? And I'm going to show you a little example about that. Did I try to do too much? That's a big one. You don't have to cram all your thoughts in there. Remember, this is an aid. It's not a crutch. Does it look nice? And am I being consistent? I've taught public speaking for 10 years. I've sat through a lot of presentations, and the audience picks up on that. Are the font sizes the same? Are the colors the same? Is everything strategic? And those are things to think about. So I have about 10 minutes, and what I want to go into in the next part are some of those examples more. So in technical presentations, you can still be interesting, and how can we achieve that? You can still be strategic in storytelling, and these are the ways to organize your thoughts. Again, when I say technical, I mean data-driven. I think that's what you can relate to most. So state your research question. That's in your introduction. What is it that you were trying to figure out? How did you do that? What were some methods that you went through? What are some assumptions that you have? Assumptions, they're okay to talk about because you can say, this is what I thought going in, and this is what I think coming out of this experience. And go into your results. What is some evidence? How did you interpret that evidence? Who were making the right decisions on this behalf? And then in your conclusion, what are those discussions, or what's the impact? I've worked a lot with graduate students with dissertation presentations and thesis presentations. And so my thing is, how did you advance science? This may not apply to you, but I'm just using it as an example. How did you advance what it is that you're showing us today? That's the real juicy part. That's what people want to talk about. So let us know about that experience. And as I said, I know that there's a lot of different ways that we can use visual aids. We have Google Slides, we have PowerPoint, we have Prezi. I'm going to stick on PowerPoint because it's pretty universal. So here are some things that I'm going to go over and how you can really make it look professional, and what are some little tricks of the trade. And a lot of it has to do with color, fonts, animation, how much information and bullets you should put on there, clutter and references. So with color, it's really effective for producing interest and contrast because it's aesthetically pleasing. My color choices are always chosen based on the presentation that I'm giving, but they're deliberate. So as you can see today, it's mostly blue. It's the Minds colors with like the yellow offset. So remember that audiences can also sometimes be color sensitive. Blue greens tend to run into each other, red oranges run into each other. And so those are things where like your message can get lost in a very easy way if you don't think about how you're going to present it. And a lot of people can't read red or green text, or it can become too burdensome. So I'm going to show you this little color wheel and how you kind of determine like what does go together and what doesn't. Like I said, I've worked at a lot of institutions of higher ed. I've sat through a lot of dissertation defenses and things like that. And a little trick of the trade that a professor taught me at a really young age was that if you match your slides, it can be effective. So like today, my slides are blue, so I'm wearing blue so that you're not distracting. That's just a little pro tip for you. So this is what I mean by trying to pick out your colors. Anything that is across from each other, like this yellow and this violet, those are going to complement each other. Does this say I think you should use electric yellow and bright violet? Absolutely not. But you need to think about what is in that group of color. So like blue and oranges, like I used today, those really complement each other. But if you use like a blue and a violet blue next to each other, those are super distracting. The eye doesn't really know where to focus. And that's in background and font. So now I lead into font. The most important thing about font, and as we get into a more in-person world once again, just remember that you're always presenting for the person in the back of the room. You're not presenting for the people that paid the big money to be right there in front of you. So font does matter, and you need to be thoughtful about it because it also helps you to pace what it is you're putting up on your slides. So if you use a bigger font, you can put less words, but you want the person in the back of the room to be able to concentrate on what you're saying. Effective fonts have straight edges and the proper amount of spacing. Ineffective fonts have too many curves and too much spacing. I only bring this up because it's super distracting for the audience. And here's some examples. I'm using a really important message. I want you to vote today. Voting is super important. And so that message gets across from these really clean font types and this adjustable spacing. The message gets a little lost if you look at it here. It becomes too trivial. It becomes a little bit more of a side note, and it also impacts your credibility, right? So even that simplest of choice can be really detrimental to the message that you're trying to present. The next thing is animations. I'm going to give you a little caveat. This slide is really hard for me to get through because I used an example as I'm also trying to give you messaging. So animations, they're really good to emphasize important points. They help you organize the speaker's flow. They help you to stay consistent from slide to slide or from idea to idea. You need to practice with them because they get broken often. And don't do too much. Too much is too much of an overload on the audience. As I said, this slide is really hard for me because I used a lot of different animations to kind of reiterate my point. But they should not be distracting. They should definitely be there as something that really helps you to navigate your flow and helps you create a sense of interest with the audience. You know, what is coming next? How are they setting this up? That's what animations are good for. Prezi and things like that are all animation based, you should think of your audience because some people with their, some audience members, their attention spans, it becomes really distracting with too much going on. My middle point here is to talk about bullets. You don't always need to use them, but they are also good for flow. They help emphasize information. You should use one idea per bullet point. And the rule of thumb is to not use more than 5 to 7 words per bullet, or even more than 5 bullets per page. I know that was a lot there, but basically what you want to walk away with is be strategic. Don't put all the information up there. The audience doesn't need to know it, nor do they want it. They want to hear from you. You're the speaker. Again, this is just an aid. It's to help you reiterate those really important ideas. And then you want to keep it clean and clear. If you put too much up there and it becomes too much of a distraction, the audience is going to be reading your slides or reading your visuals or whatever you put in front of them. That will be the focus, and you should be the focus. You should always be the focus. You're the expert. You're the one that they came to see. Or at least that's how I always feel. And then with PowerPoints, with text and clutter, keep it simple. I cannot emphasize enough that everything you do in a presentation should be strategic. So it should be an aid. You can use multiple slides to explain one idea. You can use one slide to explain a really complex idea. And so the last couple minutes here before we go into our activity, I'm going to show you how you can kind of clean that up a little bit. Because pictures do say 1,000 words. And we know that there's a lot of ways that you can show data in technical presentations. There's a lot of ways you can use pictures as support. And I want to show you kind of what are some clean ways to do that, especially showing data, because I love data. Data leads to a lot of rich discussions. A lot of people have a lot of opinions on data that's presented. And so you can use that to your advantage. Charts and graphs are super effective. Here's different types. We all know them, right? They can show deviations, comparisons, schematics, whatever it is. A picture says 1,000 words, and data, I think, is a good way to use as an example of how that can be achieved. But the thing about it is there's a lot of different data softwares, and they output their own pictures, and they output what the data should look like. You don't always need to use what is presented in front of you if it doesn't seem clear. You can recreate it if it's necessary, as long as you cite where it comes from. And I'm going to show you those examples. So I'm sharing my screen, but any of you can unpause or unmute yourself. Tell me your first impression of how you feel when you look at this.
Colleen, I'll jump in here.
Yeah.
This is Colin.
Hi, Colin.
I just want to, it reminds me of the petroleum engineering flowchart. And if we have any petroleum engineers on here, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's colorful and confusing, as many people are saying in the chat.
It creates anxiety for me, like absolute anxiety. And all it is trying to tell us is how many fruit was sold at the fruit stand. It's not a real complex idea, and it can create a lot of anxiety. So a way to kind of say this in a more digestible way is to simply do this. You can still talk about it. You can still, like you at the bottom, I referenced this. But oh, I can kind of sit back and really take it in. That's how many limes were sold. That's amazing. It looks like apples and banana. This isn't their year, right? You can't really get that from this, but you can still be technical and interesting, and you can recreate it, and that's okay. Here's another example. Does anyone have any sort of feeling when they see this picture? For me, I don't know what to look at. For me, if this was a presentation in front of me, I would hope that this slide was being shown for at least, I don't know, a good 5 minutes, and you walked around this entire picture with me, from like how many milliwatts are used on tidal energy powers, what the blade diameter is, what the seabed looks like, and then you're talking about location. This is a lot.
In the chat, somebody said crowded. That was a good word.
That is a perfect word. It's really crowded and it's super distracting. And like I said, what do you focus on first? Are we going to talk about where this is located? Are we going to talk about, you know, how big the blades are? I just don't know. And this is actually from a real dissertation defense that I sat through. And so I worked with her to do this. Show us the picture first in this really easy schematic, and then let's go through the blade diameters. Then let's go through what the weight is. And then we can go through all of these components, because you're navigating the flow. You're letting the audience know this is what you're super proud of and what your research has come, you know, to this closing position on. But you need to be able to take us along on that journey. And you can easily do it by recreating it in a more digestible content. So this is what I mean by being really clean, clear, and concise. And then the last thing I want to talk about is, I know how brilliant you all are, and maybe you are the experts in this content area, or maybe you're wanting to be the expert, but maybe you're not the expert yet. This information comes from some sort of place. It does come from somewhere, so it's always really important to cover your bases and put those references in there. You can use them on a page and have a smaller font. You can also, that's what I always suggest is kind of the rule of thumb. But then I also think it's really important to make sure that you reference your pictures that aren't yours or stock photos, and to have this sort of reference page at the end. You can put all of your information there. People can follow up with you if they want. It's just a way for you to show your credibility, right? This information isn't coming from me, but I did the research and I found it, and this is what I want to share with you. Okay, so we just have about 30 more seconds here. And I just want you to think about this the next time you're going into your next presentation, whatever it is, if it's informative, persuasive, which also has its own little tricks and trades, or for entertainment. Look for examples. Look at past presentations that you've done, look at YouTube, look at TED Talks, and critically think about what it is you want to do. What works really well for you? What doesn't work well for you? How are you going to execute your thoughts? You know, spend some time really thinking about those questions, and then it will show a better size of organization throughout your entire presentation. So if you're going to walk away with anything today, please walk away with this. All a presentation is storytelling. Tell us what you want to tell us, tell it to us, and then tell us what you just told us. It really is that simple. Reiteration is a key. Know your audience. Who are those people that you're really trying to get your message through to? Practice, know your time limit. People aren't going to want more than that. And also know what it is that you're putting in front of your audience. And then you're the star. You should know this information more than anyone else. And your aides are just a support. And I can't emphasize that enough. If you tend to lean on them too much, it's going to be too distracting, and it's going to take away from the important things that you're talking about. Okay. If you have any other questions, I'm always around. I'm always happy to go through this on a one-on-one basis. Please use me as a resource if you feel so inclined. You can reach me very easily at my email, cbudzinski@mines.edu.